Good evening, everyone. I'm Vibha Chakrala. I'm the IT project manager at SciSec. First and foremost, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Before we begin, there are a couple of simple ground rules. I would like to request all the attendees to stay on mute throughout the webinar. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. In case you have any queries during the course of the session, you can type them out in the chat box and it will be responded to after the completion of the presentation. And also we are going to record this webinar, so the recording will be uploaded onto the SciSec YouTube channel. So you can always go back and refer to the video if necessary. This webinar is a part of the Sangha Chadvam series that we started in the month. The object
Your voice is breaking.
Vibha, your voice is breaking. Hello, Vibha.
Yes, as I was saying, we have a lot of interesting webinars lined up over the next couple of weeks. The immediate webinar schedule next week is on Secure SDLC. Secure SDLC stands for Secure Software Development Lifecycle Practices. SDLC concept is nothing shifting the concept of security to the left or to the earliest phases of the software development lifecycle. So incorporating security practices and tools from the beginning of the SDLC lifecycle will save the organizations a lot of time and money. This is because the cost of remediating a security vulnerability in post-production is so much higher and dearer compared to addressing it in the earlier stages of the SDLC. We'll learn much more about this topic in the coming weeks. Also, we have other sessions scheduled for the next month. We'll be opening up registrations for these sessions shortly. Previous videos can be accessed on the SciSec's YouTube channel. And we are also happy to announce that we are now on Twitter and we have a verified handle on Twitter. You can follow us on SciSec COE. So we will have an assessment at the end of this webinar, and those who successfully complete the assessment will be provided with a certificate. So the assessment will be kept open for about 60 minutes after the completion of the webinar. And the questions are from the topic that will be covered during the webinar itself. So it is quite not so complex. So those who get 15 out of 20 questions right, so we'll have 10 questions on BCP and 10 questions on DR. Those who achieve a score of 15 and above, that is 75%, will receive a certificate of achievement. And those who could not take the assessment but who have attended the entire session will be awarded a certificate of participation. So while registering or while taking this assessment, kindly ensure that you provide the right Gmail ID so that the certificate is shared on the appropriate email ID. And the link for the assessment will be shared right at the end of the webinar. And also, we will be asking for feedback at the end of the session along with the assessment. I request you to kindly provide genuine feedback, and I assure that we will take it positively and implement everything in our purview. Moving on to the session, it is my pleasure to welcome our speakers for today, Mr. Srinam Srinivasan and Ms. Lavanya Dakshinamurthy from Deloitte, India. Hearty welcome, sir and ma'am. A quick note on the speakers for today. Sriram is a manager at Deloitte India LLP. He has over 16 years of hands-on IT experience spanning various domains and technologies, including IT risk management, BCPDR, IT infra and data center management, storage and backup management, IT strategy and program management, ISO 27001 based audits and implementation. He also holds multiple certifications such as ISO 27001 lead auditor, ISO 22301 lead auditor. He's a Prince 2 practitioner, an ITIL V3 expert, IBM Tivoli Suite certified administrator, and he's also an MCSA and MCSA. Welcome, sir. Our next speaker is Ms. Lavanya Dakshinamurthy. She is a deputy manager in the risk advisory team of Deloitte India. She has over 8 years of experience in information security and BCM. She holds an IRCA approved ISMS lead auditor certification on assessing and conducting information security audits for organizations. She's also trained in ISO 22301 2012 business continuity standards, and she has globally managed several BC activities for most of the client-based engagements. And she's also involved in interacting with clients and providing roadmaps on implementing BCP strategies. Welcome the both of you. We are very much looking forward to this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vibha. So Lavanya would be taking us through the business continuity management the first, because that is an overarching concept which includes crisis management, which includes incident management and disaster recovery, which is a technical perspective as well. So I would be taking over the second part, which is disaster recovery, which would be a bit more on technical. So now I hand it over to Lavanya for explaining us what business continuity is all about. So Lavanya, all yours.
Thank you, Sriram. So thank you, Vibha, for the very nice introduction, and very good evening to all. My heartfelt thanks to SciSec for this wonderful opportunity, as it is a matter of great pride and privilege to present in this webinar. And thank you, participants, for joining in this session. So let's quickly glance through the agenda for today's session. So the main objective here is to make you familiarize with most of these concepts by end of this webinar. So before we get into today's session, I would like to add few pointers regarding the importance of this topic, as there is a key role for each one of us to play in this environment. As you all know, we are staying in an VUCA environment. So you must have heard about this term VUCA. And so when I say VUCA, it's VUCA. And what does this VUCA refer to, or what does this VUCA stand for? So VUCA, here V refers to vulnerable, and U stands for uncertain, and C for complex, and A for ambiguous. So in this VUCA environment, uncertainty is the only certainty, and learning how to live with this insecurity is the only security. So I believe everyone would agree with me in this point, as this COVID situation is a right example as this for this as well. So in this VUCA environment, if you see what needs to be protected. So in this VUCA environment, the priority is obviously the people. We need to protect our assets. We need to protect information, reputation, and environment. So how we protect all this is through building a robust platform that can be achieved through business continuity. So this is where we are going to start with. So let me start with defining business continuity. So I'm going to give it in the, I'm going to talk about this from the organization perspective. So business continuity refers to the organization's ability to ensure its operations and its core business functions are not severely impacted by any unpleasant incident. So you can also say that the BC or the business continuity, it will details out the entire steps. Maybe for an organization, helps the organization understand what it should do before an incident, during an incident, and after an incident. So what are all the steps or the measures it should take to handle any kind of disaster that happens. So overall, we can say business continuity ideally helps any organization to anticipate the risk, prepare for threats, respond and adapt to any unexpected events. So business continuity is effective. It's effective only by the implementation of its core elements. So if you see the core elements of business continuity, it's obviously the emergency response plan, IT disaster recovery plan, incident response plan, crisis management plan, and continually improving the same. So these are all the core elements of business continuity. So without getting into much depth, let us quickly touch upon these concepts and the importance of these elements that constitute the business element. So I would like to take each one of this, and let me not get into too much depth, but I'll explain the concepts to you. So let's start with emergency response plan. So this emergency response plan will ideally help any organization to address any various emergency situations that can occur within the organization. So maybe this plan can include whom to contact, how to contact, and what are the measures they should take. So all this is clearly documented in the emergency response plan. So moving on to the IT disaster recovery plan. So the overall idea is to develop a plan that will allow your IT department to recover enough data and system functionality, and to allow a business or an organization to operate at a minimum level even when there is a disaster. So this is mainly related to your IT setup. So I'm not going to talk about this in detail, because anyways my colleague Mr. Sriram is going to take this up in the subsequent session. So moving on to the next, which is the incident response plan. So before this, I would like to tell what is an incident. So if you ask me what is an incident, so it can be defined as any event that can cause a loss or a damage. So this is what is an incident all about. So and as the name implies, and managing this incident, what are the activities that an organization must take to identify, analyze, and correct those incidents to prevent the future reoccurrence of such incidents. So all this would be clearly documented in your incident response plan. Moving on to your crisis management plan. So here, let's start with understanding what is a crisis. So a crisis is also can be any event that is going to lead to an unstable or a dangerous situation. If an event is not contained within a certain period of time, it is going to lead to a very unstable or a dangerous situation affecting a group or an organization as well. And crisis management will ideally refer to the identification of these threats to the organization. So when we say identification of threats, it can include both the internal and the external threats. And what are the threats and impacts to stakeholders, and what are the methods that the organization should take. So all these are clearly documented in the crisis management plan. So finally is the continual improvement. So this is very essential part of business continuity, because this will help you to improve and enhance the performance of your BCMS, and to ensure the organization is very robust and it is business resilient. So thus, when all the core elements are managed properly and it is effectively managed, then this will improve the overall resiliency of the organization. So what do we mean by business resilience? So business resilience can be defined as an ability of the organization to quickly adapt to any disruptions while maintaining the continuous business operations and safeguarding the people and its assets. So I guess you could now have an overall idea of what is business continuity and what is business resilience. So moving on to, so once the organization is business resilient, let's see what are the benefits of being business resilient. So these are the few quick benefits of the organization being business resilient. It first and foremost is it gives the organization a structured method of responding to any incident. So maybe they do not have to panic at the last moment when the incident comes. They have a very structured way of working. Everything is documented very clearly. So these are few benefits of that. And next comes the customer confidence. So once you have a structured approach and you're handling the incident very clearly, this will obviously improve the confidence of the customer as well. And this will also give a very positive assurance to your regulators and your shareholders. So when there is more positive assurance to the regulators, shareholders, then they tend to, out of trust and confidence, they tend to invest more. And moving on to and this will give you a competitive advantage as well. So it will give an edge over your competitors. Though there are a lot of competitors, when your organization's business resilience, you have an edge over them. And in turn, this will also cultivate a resilient organization culture among the employees as well. So because the employee safety is also a key, factor here. So these are few benefits of an organization being business resilient. So here in this particular slide, we are going to see about the business continuity life cycle. So when you see the business continuity life cycle, So this will help any organization to keep moving during any unforeseen circumstances, because it clearly lists out the different phases that a business continuity life cycle will involve. So if you see the 6 phases, so the first and foremost is you need to understand the risk and the impact on your business. So before, I guess you would have heard about the word risk, but what does risk definitely mean? So risk is nothing but it can be defined as any uncertainty. So when you say risk can be defined as any uncertainty that can lead to any loss or a damage. So when you understand the risk of your particular organization, you should be able to analyze the impact on that business as well. So what could be the different impacts? So there are certain impacts which I can readily cite. So there could be a financial impact, there could be an operational impact, there could be regulatory impact. So there are a lot of impacts that could be imposed on an organization. So the first and foremost step of the business continuity life cycle will be to understand the risk and the impact on your business. So moving on to the next phase, which is you're developing a business continuity strategy. So what do we mean by a business continuity strategy? So this, okay, let me explain this with an example. So like in case a primary site is not accessible to you and you're not able to make use of the particular site, then what are the different options you will think of? Like in case you have to go to your office and you see that your two-wheeler is not working, what are the different options that you will come to your mind? So either you will try to call your friend to pick you up to drop you in the office, or the next option what you would think of, you would either try to book a cab. So the ultimate aim should be to achieve the goals and objectives of the organization. So what is that you will do? You will have to come out with different business continuity strategies. So I'll anyways be touching upon this topic in detail in the later slides. So moving on to what is business continuity plans. So this is the third phase of business continuity. So you need to come up with a BC plan. So this business continuity plan is a very key part of any organization, because it will include the details of the entire details of the organization. It will constitute your organizational policy, purpose and scope of your business continuity, what are the goals and objectives in terms of BCMS, and what are the key business areas, that is what are your key functions, who are the key processes, and what are the process owners. So all this will be clearly documented in your business continuity plan. So you could also state that this business continuity plan will serve as a response planning. This will help any organization response planning, because it sets out the details of how the business must operate following an incident and how it is expected to return to normal. So when you say normal, it can also be called as business as usual. So this is the in the quickest possible time. So all these minute details are documented in the business continuity plan. So moving on to the fourth phase, which is called as the implementation phase. So when you say the implementation phase, so we have seen in the phase 2 and phase 3 where we have spoke about our business continuity strategies and business continuity plans. So in this phase, we need to ideally implement our plans and procedures. So once you implement them, to check that, you need to check their effectiveness as well. So when you speak about implementation, this is where we get introduced to two other concepts, which is your business impact analysis and risk assessments. So that will be covered in your implementation phase. So moving on to the test phase. So here, in this test phase, it is very essential for you to test your BC plans and your procedures at regular basis, because once you test, you will be able to ensure that the effectiveness of your BC plan. So, and it is also required for you to conduct trainings as well to ensure that all the details in your BC plans and procedures are up to date. So moving on to the last phase, which is your review and maintain. So when you talk about reviewing and maintaining your BCP, this ensures that all your plans, procedures, everything is aligned with your current business practices. So there are different ways of reviewing and maintaining your BC documents or your BC plans. So like you can talk about your management review, where you can share your BCP reports, the business continuity reports, to the leadership to seek their so you can share with them the reports and you can seek them their feedback on that and what are the ways to improve. So these are the few things in management review is one of the review plan. And the other thing, you can also think about performing an internal audit. So when you conduct an internal audit, so you will have a clear view of how adherent are you in certain in your business continuity, like what are the documents, are they up to date, is it required? So all this would be carried out in your internal audits as well. So these are few ways of reviewing and maintaining. So this comprises of your last phase in the BC life cycle. So I guess you must now be clear of what are the different 6 phases in the business continuity life cycle. So if you could remember, I have spoke about these 2 concepts, which is business impact analysis and RA, which is risk assessment. So these 2 are a very key concepts of business continuity, without which or without understanding this, the business continuity will never be complete. So I'm going to give some extra importance to these concepts and make you understand this. And in the interest of time, I might be rushing to the slides. So in case you have any questions, please feel free to type it in the chat box, and I would definitely be addressing the same at the end of this session. Okay, so here we have seen what is the BC program is all about. So it starts with understanding the organization and understanding the risk and the impacts to them, and you have to come up with developing your BC strategies. So when you say BC strategies, it can be your BC plans, procedures, everything. And once you do that, you need to move on to implementing those. You need to implement them, and once you implement them, you need to continuously maintain and review those plans and procedures. So this is the overall idea of this BCMS program. And what is the ultimate aim behind all this? So the ultimate objective of all this is to protect your people, your facilities, and your key network systems as well, your IT, communication, all the network systems. So this is the ultimate aim of this BCMS program. And touching upon the other 2 important concepts. So the first and foremost is performing a business impact analysis. So what is the use of business impact analysis? So before getting into explaining this concept, let me give you an overview of how an organization is. So in case if you look at any organization, so an organization has different functions, like you have an HR function, you have a IT function, you have an operations. So there are different functions available in an organization, and under each function you have different sub functions under them. HR, you have your onboarding, you have your learning and development team. So there are a lot of sub functions as well. So this business impact analysis will ideally help you to identify which are your key business processes and which are your key business functions. And it will also help you to have a priority between all this. So which is very critical, you need to recover them first. Not all the functions in an organization are very critical. So you need to identify which are the critical functions and you need to prioritize between them. So once you prioritize between those functions, you also need to determine what is the impact on them. So when you say impact, it can be any kind of financial, operational, and legal impact of disruption on them. So to arrive at this impact, you need to do a classification of impact, like whether this impact is low, medium, high, because based on the impact, you will have to take the adverse actions on that. So, and the other objective of business impact analysis is also you have to compute your recovery time requirements. That is, you have to compute your RTO values, RPO values, and MAO values. So this is the key objective of your business impact analysis. And touching upon the other important aspect, which is your risk assessment. So the risk assessment, as the name implies, so you know what is risk. I've already defined the definition of risk. So how do you address those risks? So a risk assessment will ideally help you to address all kinds of risk that an organization can encounter. So it can be your external risk, internal risk. So it will help you to perform a risk assessment on your critical business processes, and it will also help you to perform a risk assessment on your critical sites and facilities under the scope. So now I would like to touch upon each of this in much more detail. So touching upon this business impact analysis. So we have told that here in business impact analysis, we will clearly classify the impact. So there can be different impacts. So moving to the next slide. So here I've just tried to give you an example to explain it better. So this is just for an example, and it can be customized based on the requirement of the organization. So when you classify the impact, so I had been reiterating that there are different kinds of impact, like business, financial, operational. How do you make that classification? How do you categorize it as low, medium, and high? So let me take one particular impact type and explain it to you. So let's start with financial. So in case due to a disaster or due to a crisis situation, you feel that the impact, the financial impact, the loss has come to over up to 2 lakhs loss per day, then you will classify that impact as a low impact. So the financial impact for that particular organization or for the particular process is low. and in case the loss is between 2 to 10 lakhs per day, then you will classify the financial impact as medium. And at the same point of time, if the loss is more than 10 lakhs per day, then you will classify it as high. So then you will say that the financial impact for this particular process is very, very high. So like this, you can categorize under different things. So moving on to the regulatory impact. So in case if there is a regulatory impact, so in case of regulatory impact, what will be the difference? So in case the regulatory impact is low, then only the warning letters will be issued. Okay, then if it is going to be medium, then they might issue a show cause notice to you, by the regulator can issue this. So this is in case of the medium impact, this will be the so show cause notice might be issued. So then when it is a high impact, then it can also lead to seizure of a facility and cancelling of your business licenses. So this is just an example for you. So this will help you understand what is the classification or how you need to arrive at the classification of impact. So moving on to, I had already touched upon these values. If you have seen, I have spoke about something called as RTO and MAO values. So it is very important for you to understand these concepts and the relation between all this, because so without these values, it is not possible for you to perform a business impact analysis. So these are the core concepts of BIA. So so I request, like, if you can focus more, if you have any questions, you can definitely ask me at the end of this session. So I would like to start with giving the definition of what is RTO, what is the definition of RTO. So to start with, what is an RTO? So RTO stands for recovery time objective. So, and recovery time objective. So what do you mean by RTO? So what is recovery time objective? So in case of any disaster, it is the duration of time within which a business processes must be restored after a disaster in order to avoid any unacceptable consequences. So that is defined as an RTO. So let me explain this with a simple example as well. So maybe if there is an impact on the organization and you're not able to continue your services or businesses. So it is not possible for us to resume our business and start delivering the process. There will be obviously some delay. But how long that delay is going to be? So you will, at least after 1 hour or 2 hours, based on the resources available and based on the network systems or laptops or whatever available, you will start working and you will start delivering your services. So at this point of time at which you will take to resume your business or resume your processes is called as the recovery time objective. So, and then touching upon what is RPO. So RPO is nothing but recovery point objective. So this recovery point objective, so you can define this in simple terms. RPO can be defined as the amount of data at risk, and it is the amount of time it will take to recover from the data loss and return to service. So that is the definition for RPO. So moving on to what is MAO. So before understanding what is MAO, we need to understand the concept of MPCO. So with the example which I had given you, we would be able to resume. I had told you that during any kind of disaster, we will start delivering certain kind of services with the minimum amount of people and then with the minimum number of systems available, we will start working. But is it possible to deliver 100% in the first 2 hours? It is obviously not possible. Like this COVID situation is also an example. Maybe like after 4 to 5 months of this situation, we have a kind of stabilized, worked on different strategies, like who are the critical resources and who should be given with the laptops, but all this. But imagine the situation before 3 to 4 months where most of the organizations were in huge chaos, because it is ideally because you need to plan your RTO, MAO and all this. So when you start saying that when you will start delivering how much percentage of work, that is what is the percentage of work you'll be starting to deliver, it is 20% or 30%, that can be defined as your minimum business continuity objective, or it can be called as an MBCO. So now defining what is your MAO, which is maximum acceptable outage or maximum tolerable period of disruption. So I repeat, so MAO is your maximum acceptable outage or maximum tolerable period of disruption. So as the name implies, this can be defined as a maximum period of time that a business process can be inoperative. So after which the organization's survival will be at great risk. So you can ideally say this is the maximum time that an organization must take. because beyond which there will be huge risk. That is, they can have to answer to the questions of the customers, huge penalties might be imposed. So this is a maximum period of time within which they have to wait. So this can be defined as your MAO or MTPD, which is maximum tolerable period of disruption. So once you start working on all this, once you start working, keeping in mind your RTO values with and MBCO values. So once you start doing all this, the objective will be to resuming to normal operations. So you will, by the end of maybe, once you have enough number of resources in place, and when you have even enough number of systems in place, then you will slowly start resuming to your normal operations. So I hope I've tried to make this concept clear to you, like you are quite clear with what is business impact analysis and how do we perform business impact analysis and what are the core concepts of BIA. So with this in mind, I would like to go to the next slide, which is risk assessment. So risk assessment can be defined as, so I think I've already given you the definition of risk and what does a risk assessment refer to. So actually, to start with risk assessment, so this risk assessment can be defined as an overall process or a method that the organization is used to identify the risk to the organization. So it can identify the internal threats, internal risk, external risk, and what is the impact of them, how are you going to manage them. So all this will be performed in your risk assessment. So to start with risk assessment, first you need to understand the organization clearly. You need to understand the organizational context. So when you say organizational context, you need to understand who are your key stakeholders. You need to understand who are your key stakeholders. You need to understand what is the vendors, third parties. So all this you need to have an idea. So this can happen only if you have clear communication and consultation with your process owners. So you will have a clear communication with the process owners and the process heads to have a clear understanding of what is the process all about and understanding the context of the organization. So once you understand all this, you need to perform this step-by-step approach. So this risk assessment has different steps to be carried out. So it has your risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, and risk treatment. So what do you do in risk identification? So as the name implies, you will identify all kinds of risk. Maybe it can be internal risk, external risk. So all these risks are identified. So you make note of all these risks and threats to the organization. And once you're done with all this, you get involved in doing a risk analysis, like what is the vulnerabilities in the system, and maybe what is the different kinds of impact of those risks. So you start working on all that. So when you say vulnerability, so I have used this term vulnerability. So let me explain what is vulnerability in simple terms. So vulnerability, you can simply remember, like vulnerability can be defined as any weakness in a system. So when you start making note of all your risk, you also need to make note of all your vulnerabilities in the systems, and you need to do a thorough analysis of this risk. And you need to also evaluate those risks. So when you say evaluate, you need to arrive like what is the impact and what is the risk rating. You need to rate it, whether is the risk low, high, medium. So not all risk to an organization can be high. Not all risk to an organization can be low. So you need to properly evaluate the risk. You need to analyze based on the impact. You need to do the risk evaluation. So finally is where we come to the risk treatment. So when you say risk treatment, so you need to obviously treat the risk which you have encountered. So you need to, how do you treat those risks? So there are different ways of treating those risks, or you can say there's different options of treating those risks. So you obviously put into place certain controls. You put into place certain controls to treat those risks, certain preventive measures to treat those risks. So, and there are different options included in treating those risks. So there are 4 key options that we can include in risk treatment. So it is your risk reduction, risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk acceptance. So these are the 4 points involved in risk treatment. So it's like if you start with risk reduction, it is like, as the name implies, you're just putting in some controls to reduce the kind of risk. And when you say risk avoidance, you feel that maybe this point of time, this risk is not good to be taken. So you try to avoid that risk. And when you say risk transfer, you get into partnership, or when you, the partnership firms or to third parties, you transfer the risk to the third parties. That is, you don't take the ownership or responsibility of the particular risk, you transfer it to your third parties or to partnership firms. So that is risk transfer. And finally comes the risk acceptance. So when you say risk acceptance, you tend to understand that in spite of putting all the controls in place, still the risk is not getting reduced. So you try to accept that risk. So these are the 4 options included in a risk treatment. So I think you have now understood the flow between risk assessment. So I think it starts with identification, analysis, evaluation, treatment, and finally is what is the final stages. It's a very key step. You need to continuously monitor and review this. So when you say you need to continuously monitor and review the process, this is to ensure that this risk doesn't reoccur frequently. So, and what are the measures or the mitigation plans that you need to put in place to ensure that this kind of risk doesn't reoccur? So you need continuous monitoring and review of this. So this is all about risk assessment. So I hope, I guess, you are clear with both the concepts about BIA and risk assessment as well. And then now moving on to the next phase, I guess we spoke about in the BC's life cycle, we spoke about different phases. So of which we have covered few of them, and now we are going to see in detail about business continuity strategy. So I have given the definition of business continuity strategy already. So like business continuity strategy is usually comes in place. Imagine the primary site is not available for you. In case the primary site is not available and all your activities gets damaged, that is, you're not able to carry on your business. So what is the different options that you should take in? So when you think about two options, the two options are obviously your relocation and work transfer. So let me take one by one and explain to you. So starting with relocation. So what is relocation? So in this option, what do you do? So imagine there is only a single site and all the operations are functioning out of that single site. And that single site is damaged or disrupted due to some kind of crisis situation. So what is the options that you will think about? So there are different kinds of sites that you will think about. So this is like a few. So these are the few sites. Like it can be called as a hot site, a warm site, cold site. So so let me explain to you about hot site. So what is a hot site? So hot site is nothing but it is a full-fledged backup or it's a standby alternate site. So in this hot site, this can be occupied within a very short notice. That is, in this hot site, you will keep everything ready. So you have everything readily available there. So it can be your IT setup, your dedicated chairs, and everything would be the setup would be infrastructure would be all set up clearly. So you can the recovery is much more faster, and you can occupy this. So and the workload is being taken immediately, and the recovery also happens instantly. So like this is equipped with all your hardware and communication capabilities, so that can be occupied during any kind of disaster situations. Okay, so this is all about your hot site. So moving on to what is your cold site. So cold site, you can say just the opposite of hot site. It is like a very bare bone setup. It has a very basic infrastructure or the basic facilities. Like the recovery, it's like you will not have everything readily available over there. You will have the basic infrastructure and connectivity. And later, the other things you need to figure out, maybe during the kind of disaster or only during that particular event, you need to figure out how you will get your network, how you will get your systems. So all this you need to figure out. So this is all about your cold site. And what is warm site? Warm site is something in between your hot site and your cold site. So this site ideally has all the necessary infrastructure and IT, but however, it has to be configured to meet the requirements of the process. So the sites will ideally have everything. It will have your hardware, it will have your connectivity, and the warm sites can also have the backups on hand, but they might not be very complete. So this is about your warm site. So so in simple terms, you can say like hot site will be fully functional, and it allows your immediate recovery from disaster and takes a lesser time to occupy as well. And cold site will include your infrastructure, but and the technology, but it will take some more time because it's a bare bone setup. Then I think the one more option left out in relocation is obviously your work from home option, I guess, which most of you must be familiar with. So this work from home option is what is like all the organization is currently relying on. So this option allows employees to work connectivity, so the remote connectivity, and carry on all their deliverables. So this is these are the different options available under relocation. Now moving on to this option 2, which is obviously a work transfer. There are two things in work transfer. So what do you mean by work transfer? So it's like you're transferring your work to someone else. So it can be incremental workload or cross training. So incremental workload is like, okay, let me give you an example for this. So there is an organization and it is like, you have an organization and you have like the same, it's like functioning in Bangalore and Chennai. The organization has two offices. It is in Bangalore and Chennai. Imagine the Bangalore site is completely down, and once the Bangalore site is down, you'll feel that the Chennai operations, they must take over the work activities from Bangalore. So you have that preparation readily in plan. So in case something happens, the people from same department over there in Chennai, they take over the activities from Bangalore and they start functioning. So there is no much gap and there is no impact on the business as well. So this is what you can call as incremental workload. So moving on to cross training. So what is cross training refers to? You select few people, they can be non-critical staffs, and you can make use of them. You can make use of them during the kind of disaster scenarios. You can give them cross training, and they can take over the load and they can support you. So this is about your business continuity strategy. If you could remember, we also spoke about the BCP test as well. So let me quickly take you through the BCP test. So we have 4 kinds of well-known test, BCP test available, which is your desk check and walkthrough, call tree test, tabletop test, and your simulation test. So to start with desk check and walkthrough, so to explain it to you in very simple terms, this is a very basic test procedure where you will just check whether all your documents are in place. They are all like up to date with the current details. So you just check these. So this can be defined to check whether the viability of the plans and procedures, whether it is all up to date with the current details. This is what you do in your desk check and walkthrough BCP test. Moving on to your call tree test. So in call tree test, so the main intention of this test is to ensure you're able to communicate with your participants. You're able to communicate with your employees in the organization. So how do you do that? It's like you ideally randomly send them a message during any kind of disaster scenario, and how effectively the message gets communicated to them. So you check the effectiveness of that. So in certain organizations make use of certain tools for this to perform the call tree test, and they can also carry this by manually also. So this is about your call tree test. So moving on to tabletop test. So I guess this name itself implies what is this test all about. So in this tabletop test, you perform this test by getting a roundtable discussion with all the key stakeholders of the organization. Like you invite people from your HR, you invite people from your admin, you invite people from your transport, from your IT, and you randomly give them a scenario and you ask them, how will you react to the scenario? And you will check their preparedness from BCP perspective. And are they well prepared? Do they have all the measures readily to face any kind of incident? So you check the preparedness. So this is about your tabletop test. So moving on to your simulation test. So this is a kind of expensive test because we should say this is a kind of expensive test because it will perform the real actions. That is, it's like doing a live testing. So like imagining a situation has happened and you will react to it, like you will have to move people to the alternate site. You will check, you will move people to the alternate site. You will set up all the infrastructure there, all the network systems, and you will check how soon they are able to resume their business and their RTO values or the values which they have given the documents, is it matching? So you do a live dry run of the entire program. So that is what is carried out in your simulation test. So I guess with this, we have covered the BCP strategies and the BCP test. So moving on to the automation of business continuity. So business continuity includes a lot of work, and so it's ideally good to automate few of the business continuity program. So you can use the different techniques, like you can use the documentation tools. So when you say documentation tools, you can use your spreadsheets, simple databases, everything, basic tools for documentation. And when it comes to BCM planning software, these tools can be used for building or documenting your recovery procedures, because those are huge documents and you need to prepare them. So you can use this BCM planning software for that. Like even BIA and RA can also be performed using these planning softwares. Like cloud services also provide this kind of BC planning softwares. They seem to be more reliable. And when it comes to the third comes to document storage. So when you say document storage, this refers to the consolidated storage of documentation. Maybe in BCP, you need to store critical files and huge documents, you need to store them. And during a disaster, you need to readily refer them also if necessary. Your recovery procedures, everything needs to be stored in some secured location. So for this, many organizations are now depending on cloud-based solutions, like they're using your Dropbox.com, Box.com, private cloud provider. And some organizations are highly reliable on SharePoint as well. So like they store as a central repository, they put all the documents in the SharePoint as well. So moving on to the this for the fourth one, which is your communication notification tool. So these tools are generally used to communicate your short and directed messages to the recovery teams or to reach out to your employees. So I guess if you remember, we spoke about this in your quality test as well. So now most of the organizations are using lot of tools like for this communication notification. Like if you want me to give you an example, I guess Everbridge, certain organizations are using Everbridge tool to automate this process of notification communication. And some common means of communication is ideally your Skype, WebEx, Zoom, all this is there. But still, we still consider email as the most commonly used means of communication and notification tool. And last, touching upon this alternate service providers. So, during any disaster, the ultimate aim of any organization would be to quickly recover. And it is not always feasible to work from home. So what is the other option? So we rely on certain alternate service providers. So they will give you certain equipments like workstations, printers, phones, and everything. Like many organizations are now during this COVID situation, they're currently reliable on Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, OpenStack Cloud, and many more. So I would quickly like to give you some benefits of automating business continuity. So the first and foremost is it's very time and cost effective. So it saves lot of money and time for you, and it gives you an improved access and security. So since you put in SharePoints, and if you the security is more, then it ensures a compliance and rapid change management, and it also minimizes the potential for error since there is no manual intervention. And okay, so moving on to the next slide. So this is regarding your framework. So ISO 22301 2019. So this is a business continuity management standard published by the International Organization for Standardization, that is ISO, which will help the organization to implement and business continuity management system. So it will ideally help any organization to build its BCMS. So that will help the organization to prepare itself and respond and recover from any crisis situation. So this ISO 23313 framework is based on the PDCA model, which is called as a Plan, Do, Check, Act model. And you have around 1 to 10 clauses. And all these clauses are dependent on any one of these phases. Like if you have clause 4, 5, 6, 7, they all fall under the planning phase. And clause 8 will fall under the do phase. And clause 9 will fall under your check phase. And clause 10 will fall under your act phase. So this is to tell about the ISO 22301 framework for business continuity. So I guess we are moving to the end of this session. So I would also like to highlight like how BCP can add value to you. Like we know there are a lot of students who are also a part of this session today. So I thought like this slide will be of help to you, because once you start looking for job, there may be a lot of options in front of you. So I recommend career must always be by your choice and not by chance. So because if you make a right choice, it will add great value to you and to your career as well. So these are few career opportunities with BCP, and I would also like to reiterate that by choosing BCP as your career, there are even opportunities for you to move up to the top executive leadership level as well. So and yes, I guess we have come to the end of this session. So first of all, thank you so much for patiently listening to me, because the main intention of this presentation is to convey this message clearly, because business continuity is all about forewarned is forearmed. So, so once again, thanks for the opportunity. I guess I was able to convey most of the concepts clearly to you. So thank you so much, and have a pleasant evening, all of you. And over to you, Sriram.
Thank you, Lavanya. So can you go to the first slide? Yes, I understand. In the interest of time, I would try to make it a bit faster, and I hope you're able to hear my voice pretty clearly. We are going to talk about disaster recovery, but there are many concepts which Lavanya just explained in terms of business continuity is going to resonate back again, because the terms, which is RTO, RPO, MAO, these are common terms, because business continuity, as I said earlier, is the overarching concept, and disaster recovery is the technical concept which resides inside it. So let's talk about a bit on technical to all the techies out there. Again, one quick notion and disclaimer over here is this is going to be an introductory part of disaster recovery, because generally disaster recovery contains multiple part of computing system storage and network and your physical premises of data center itself. So which actually would take a couple of days of training, because usually the trainings which I have experienced and I've been a part of, there's a lot of explanation which used to go on the network perspective as well as in the storage perspective itself, because we would have definitely seen this concept of disaster recovery resonating with backups and storage and ensuring that the data is resilient and the data is brought back at the right time when it is required. So that would be about it. So let's talk a bit technical on disaster recovery, and wherever the points such as RTO or RPO comes in, I would try to explain it a bit shortly because I understand. Okay, so it should be audible more, Devang, now. So let me explain it a bit more. Okay, I hear a couple of messages, voices slow. Is it better now? Any better?
Yeah, it is better now.
Perfect. All right. So it's going to be quick check on what kind of disasters are, what is a disaster and what are the kinds of disaster and what do we mean as disaster recovery. So how do we recover from it? And what is the management? Generally, management is a set of tools and practices, right? So how do we tame it and how do we ensure that as a practice, how do we maintain that recovery always happens in a positive mode and in the quicker time so that the business is up and running and the catastrophe is contained. And we would talk about those concepts again, RTO, RPO, but I would be skimming through it and I would explain it in the technical perspective, not on the business perspective, like how Lavanya had explained. And we would have a quick look on the technologies, the core segments. We would actually have a look on the complete technology on which the DR could be applicable. But we would take a quick shot into the core segments also, which is the premises, network, compute, and storage. And again, one layer in, I would like to take you inside on the tools specifically for compute and storage also, because as a part of disaster recovery, that's the core element that we should know. So we would get to know about a bit on compute and storage tools, and we would have a quick basic introduction of the cloud-based tools which are currently available in the market, because there are a plethora of tools which are available. There's a lot of cloud vendors. There is a lot of cloud-based tools which are available for disaster recovery, as well as data backup for all the applications and as far as for the overall the infrastructure levels as well. And finally, we would take a quick look as to what disaster recovery is going to do to make your career and how you can take resilience, data resilience and technical resilience as a career option, and how you can move through up on the ladder for your career using disaster recovery. Lavanya, next slide, please. Perfect. The font, okay, voice is low. All right, should be fine now. Okay. So the font in the diagram could be a bit smaller. My apologies. You would not be able to read it out, but I can read it out for you. So what is a disaster? Disaster is anything which happens by natural, like which is a natural induced one, which is a hurricane or a landslide or an earthquake, just like how it says, which brings in an effect, which brings in an effect of negative effect to the currently running stream of life. Or it could be a man-made effect also. So let's say something like a human error where data has been deleted or a database has been dropped or network has been cut or blackout has happened. And it could be an intentionally man-made disaster also. Say something like a sabotage or hacking specifically with intentions on the mind. And then like, so these could be two different categories of disasters where disasters could be classified very clearly, but either ways, in whichever way it happens, the requirement for disaster recovery is to ensure that the technical perspective, the technical amount of the business, the data, the network, the storage, the compute elements for the users is up and running as soon as possible, and users are able to access the data and the clients and the customers of the business are able to get the data immediately. And how soon we arrested, what are all the measures that which we keep over there on the ground to ensure we reach the element of deliverable or element of delivery sooner as possible is the crux of disaster recovery. So you can see that normal operations was happening, the lady over there sits on the top in the diagram, and then a disaster happens and then the operations is disrupted where all the files are piled up And yes, and then the disaster recovery operational specialist, he gets inside and then he does his work and he understands what was the disaster all about, which is more than a major incident. And he understands that, okay, so he has to work on specific element and restore the data and get it back. And yeah, so the data is restored over there and the disaster is removed. And the declaration is also done that the operation is smooth right now. And then the reconstitution process happens to normal operations back again. So that would be one cycle of disaster recovery. It's like on a lighter note, but that is ideally process-wise, that's how it goes. Because whenever more than a major incident happens, then there is a formal declaration which is done in such a way so that the entire business universe understands that technically, okay, there's a disaster which has stuck, and then we are supposed to apply all the principles and practices and the methods approved once to the ground so that we get back to the resilient point again. Lavanya, next slide, please. Perfect. So why do we need disaster recovery? Okay, there are 2-3 perspectives. One is like, yes, we want it because our data should not be lost. Second one is somebody forcing us? Yes, but it is on the positive note because the organizational policy, security policy itself requires that a disaster recovery is needed. That's much needed by the business, isn't it? So when the business is up and running, and if the business is a technical business, we better have all kind of technical resilient options so that we get back to the business notion quickly. And yes, there are various legal and regulatory requirements also, which clearly mandates either directly or in any different manner. Say, for example, if it's not disaster recovery directly, a data backup is also a smaller part of disaster recovery, which is mandated. So you need to have all the data ready. You need to have it periodically backed up. You need to have the data periodically tested in the terms of restoration and ensure that the data is fit for any kind of restoration, because the simple concept is backup is not important, but restore is. So that's where we need to ensure that the data and the network and the applications are in sync while they get back to the picture. There are a lot of regulatory requirements which you would see over there in the screen, which is like either HIPAA or for the health, on the Health Portability Act, or on various data privacy and protection acts, including GDPR and CCPA. And there are a lot of data privacy acts. So it's like, we cannot name it one or two. So, and SOX, which is Sarbanes-Oxley, and then like there's a lot of specific acts, which is like a FCPA, Financial Modernization Act, which is specific to the United States. So that these regulatory requirements require disaster recovery and data to be maintained in such a way is embedded into the organizational practice as well. And yes, we have frameworks which assist us to ensure point by point that we are taking up the steps. Say, for example, 27001 has specific clauses and controls itself as to what needs to be done. If it's a backup, is it periodically tested? If you have a third party involved, what is the kind of access control that is being done? What is the kind of data that is being used by the third party? What is the kind of data that is being accessed by them, and how resilient that needs to be, and what is the kind of area in which they work in? So there's a lot of nitty-gritties and specifics which frameworks like 27001 and 800, the NIST 800, they talk about. And PCI DSS, which we all know, most specifically on the credit cards, and then like on the card segments, which talks about much of security, which talks about user data as well, and how the data is being backed up, where all the data is being backed up, how it is being stored, and how it is being archived, what is the retention policy on all these things. So we have a clear backing from all these frameworks. We have a clear backing from all these regulatory requirements asking us. Say, for example, FDA, Food and Drug Authority, is one such regulatory authority which mandates all its organizations, whichever is a health or pharmaceutical organization, to maintain their records for a specific number of years, say something like 10 or 15, in some cases 20 years also. So those cases, a method called even archive is used, which is holding up of the data for a very long time. And that is again a part of disaster recovery as well, because say, for example, restore testing is primitively done for all the data which is backed up, but archive, when you try to test a data which is on a long-term storage, because long-term storage, they use something called tapes, which we would be seeing in the upcoming screens, but they would have their own issues as well. So practicing disaster recovery itself is a challenging part of organizational life. But yes, that has a business cycle and it has to be adhered to accordingly. So that, again, to reiterate, we need to ensure that these practices are sound for us to ensure that we have the resilient data and to bring back life into the organizational data as quickly as possible. Lavanya, next slide, please. Am I audible?
Yeah, Shriram, you are audible. I think Lavanya had some issues. She was not able to hear. Probably her connection is lost. Just give a minute for her to join back.
Sure.
Sir, can I just ask a question within that time frame?
Yeah,
Hello.
please go ahead. We can do that.
Yes, Naveen, go ahead.
Means, progression in as a business continuity. Step I should take
Naveen?
towards that, sir.
Naveen, I lost you completely over there. It was completely choppy. I don't know if it is for me only. Could you come back
Means
again?
as I'm traveling in a car.
Yeah, your voice is not very audible. Not really, Naveen. Why don't you
now,
just
sir?
put your question in the chat window?
Yeah, sure, sir. I will do that.
Perfect. Believe I heard Naveen saying he's driving probably. Okay.
Shriram, would you have a copy of the presentation that you can share?
I do have it, Karthik. I can share my screen right away.
Why don't you give that a shot?
Yes,
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 Lavanya
yes.
is having difficulty in joining.
Absolutely. Please let me know once you're able to see my screen. Let me project my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Shriram. You can put it in full screen mode.
Perfect. Now I would not be able to see any details which are typed in the chat. So kindly pardon me on that. So let me just quickly go through the next slide, which was supposed to be there. Yes. We're talking about RTO, RPO, and that was pretty much explained on the business terms by Lavanya already. So what is the technical term on the RTO and RPO over here? So here, the specific part is pretty much straightforward. A disaster hits over here, the center part, if you're able to see my mouse cursor. And RTO is the time taken for you to bring back the data. And RPO is the point to which you're supposed to restore the data back to. So something like 12 o'clock afternoon, if there's a disaster strikes, and say something like you have an RTO of 1 hour and you have an RPO of 1 hour, you're supposed to restore the data to the point of 11 a.m. within 1 hour from the time of our disaster strikes. So that is the connectivity between the RTO and RPO. And the technical factors which RTO and RPO comes along with is, unless you do a business impact assessment, you will not be able to calculate what an RTO is, what an RPO is. So business impact assessment and risk assessment, clearly they talk about what kind of impact on the assets and the services and on the functionality of your organization is. So you're specifically going to assess all the risks on the assets and the services which your organization has and all the functionality. And secondly, on the business impact assessment, if I could go to the previous slide quickly. I don't know if we went through this, but let me just do a quick recap. Here, yeah, if we could see the risk management, we are going to talk about all the assets or the operational risks and whatever it is. And risk is something about the probability, which we clearly talk about. It may happen, may not happen, but if it happens, the one which we are focusing on is the negative risk. Positive, we don't call it as a risk. And then we give a rating to it. And we talk about low risk, medium risk, high risk. So we don't much concentrate about low risk, but we live with it. But at the same time, we keep a tab on that because it may have the potential to grow higher as well. Medium risks, we apply controls, and higher risks, we are supposed to take care of them immediately. And the same input where risk management has clearly taken from the organizational perspective goes into the business impact assessment as well. So you see a lot of impacts if the business is not able to function properly. So business impact takes into account all these details as inputs, the asset level, the people who function, the functionality, and then the organizational requirement, everything. And then whatever assets are there, it includes people as well, all kind of assets. And then it calculates with the impact over there as an impact analysis, what needs to go in when. Say for example, if there are a set of applications which is much more critical, SAP application is there, Oracle is there. If it's much more critical, then you need to understand as a set of applications, as a set of critical applications, how soon they should be back in the business. Say for example, if it's banks have a zero RTO, literally. If it's possible to be achieved, yes, it is possible to achieve, but it's pretty tough and it's going to be a pretty costly affair over there. I'll explain you in the diagram down here. Pretty simple, because RTO, if it's down, say for example, if you lose a data at 12 p.m. in the afternoon, the RTO says it's 0, then you're supposed to bring back the data by 12 afternoon itself. Say something like it's going to be a near 0 RTO. So in that case, what is the solution that you need over there? You need to choose a solution accordingly, which is like a clustering or which is like a remote application according to the situation over there. Now, everything is going to be disk-based. Now, we are going a bit technical. It's going to be disk-based. And whatever disk-based solution you're going to put into the ground, it is going to cater to your immediate needs. If it is going to be RTO 0, RTO 1, you better go for a disk-based solution. So clustering is something where you have a twin brother. Either it is like a server itself, or if it's going to be a set of array of disks itself, which is going to be clustered, and one set of disk is not available, another set is going to be there. And one server, if it is not going to be there, another set is going to be there. So one asset, if it goes down, the other asset must be able to pick up without a split second immediately. And that is what is called as a clustering. So clustering has multiple methods, active, passive. So there's a lot of methods over there. But the ideal crux over here is you need to have a clone, which is like a literal cluster of the machine which is running. That is the only time when you can really achieve a tough RTO, which is like in the case of banks. But I have seen in cases of some banks, which I don't want to name, which is not bad, but at the same time, they have the limitations also. So sometimes if it is not possible for them to bring back, you would have seen the message when you try to log into net banking sometimes, or when you try to do some transactions sometimes, that particular facility is not available. Yes, some kind of upgrades must have been happening, or some maintenance or some break fix must have been happening over there. And it's not an RTO, but it's just that they are strengthening their ties over there, so that if something happens, then they should be able to bring the RTO picture to a near 0 point. RPO is pretty fine, because if it's going to be 1 hour, and if your solution is a disk-based solution, you can definitely bring that solution in the ground within the stipulated amount of time. If you're not able to bring it, the amount of business lost and the amount of money lost is going to be a challenge in front of us. So this diagram, if we can focus a bit on it, again, it talks about a similar perspective from the cloud. It actually has a disaster over here. Point objective talks about the amount of the specific point to which the data is going to be restored, and time objective is going to talk about how many hours or days or minutes or sometimes even seconds also you are going to take to restore the data. If it is the fastest one, you need clustering over there. If it is a bit okay, you need a remote replication over there. Remote replication is nothing but sending the data through WAN link connectivity in a higher speed network and on disks from one segment to another segment. So these are, I'm touching base on the base technical ideas over here, but taking these concepts, you can study them, and there's a lot of resources out there where you can get lot of inputs, and there is a lot of vendors who implement these concepts in their tools as well. HP, IBM, EMC, lot, and online restore tapes. And when we talk about tapes, it is going to be for a long-term archive. I would say long-term backup, also long-term archive also, and then you can go ahead and use that particular solution in when RTO is available in a long period of time. Say something like 1 day RTO or 12 hours, 18 hours RTO, where it's not that critical because tapes take a lot of time to restore the data, but at the same time, that's the only way where you can store it for a longer time, longer perspective, which is still being used as a solution over here. Let's quickly run into a DR planning, because when you spoke about risk management, we spoke about business impact assessment. So now we know what are all the RTOs and RPOs, the technical values for deriving into a disaster recovery specific element in an organization now. So how do you prepare a DR plan? There are two plans over here. The interesting factor is DR plan is different, DR test plan is different. The test plan is going to be something which you're going to map at that particular time of test. You're going to include the elements of that particular test and what is the ingredient and what is the requirement of that particular test that you're going to restore or do a partial disaster recovery test or a simulation or whatever it is, because tests are just going to be similar like BCP, like how Lavanya had explained. But what is the overarching DR plan? The DR plan should have the first item as a risk assessment and the BIA conducted, and there should be a contingency statement for that, because the organizational buy-in should be there as a contingency statement over there. And then the primary stakeholders from the various verticals and departments must be understanding, because these days everything is digital, everything is computers, everything is digital, everything is over the wires. So any department for that matter, if it is HR or if it is a finance or any other department, everybody accesses data through digital methods these days, and it's all data which is stored. Paper and pen is much lesser. So any one disaster recovery plan pertaining to IT, there are going to be a lot of stakeholders who needs to be involved and who needs to be there in the meetings, and they need to provide approvals as well, because availability and then like the methods in which the DR works, it has to be consented. So that's why we get to create a contingency statement. We talk to the stakeholders, we ask their inputs as well, and we ensure that that is put into the documentation over there. And then we come to the core element, technical elements. We talk about the IT infrastructure, we talk about the applications which are there, the infrastructure in the sense we talk about the premises, we talk about the network equipments, we talk about the servers, the racks, either it's a physical or a virtual server. And then we talk about the applications which reside inside these infrastructure elements. And then finally, we talk about the data which resides inside these applications. And then taking the BIA and the R recovery objectives input, which is the recovery time objective and recovery point objective, we determine the right tools and techniques for the protection, like how we saw in the previous slide. If it is going to be a near zero RTO, that is something like if a disaster strikes now and the restoration should be up to this point, then you need something which is really bigger and better. But at the same time, it's a very costly solution, but your business should be willing to spend for that. And if the business is willing to spend, and then we can understand that what kind of criticality it is. And the primary example again and again, which I would say is banks, because those are the live stuff these days. It's 24/7. Anybody can access net banking 24/7 these days. So those are the live wire businesses, which are the first example, which could be the easy elements for us to understand what it is all about. And then put everything in the paper, and then you put the control measures also. Either it is what kind of controls that you're going to put. There are 3 different types of controls. It's going to be a lot of technical, but in the interest of time, I'm just touching base on the basics over here, which is like preventive, detective, corrective. Preventive control is something which can be there to safeguard a risk even before it happens. Detective is something like an intrusion detection or intrusion prevention, which actually detects something as it comes inside. And corrective is something like which once it happens, then you can go ahead and apply it. In that case, disaster recovery itself is a corrective control, which is the biggest corrective control, because something happens, then we are going and corrective over there. So what kind of internal specific controls that you're going to place over there? And then like, again, as a check, what are all the kind of buy-in that you're going to get from all the stakeholders? You need to get it. And then you need to talk to them. You need to explain them about the intent of this particular plan. And Nobody should be saying no, but they would have their inputs that needs to be taken inside, and then the approvals, and they have to sign it as well as a stakeholder, primary stakeholder. And then you need to assemble something called as a DR team, because when something happens as a disaster recovery, there should be a disaster recovery team lead who will be declaring that the disaster is declared, because anything and everything is not a disaster. So what is a disaster then? We saw in the first slide, what are all the disasters? But at which point does it become a disaster? Smaller elements could be incidents. Major elements could be major incidents. Anything which is more than the category of major incident is going to be a disaster. But this differs from organization to organization. In a higher organization, a CEO or a CTO's data getting corrupted or lost itself is a disaster. In a smaller organization, it could not be the same way. So it all depends upon the organizational specific as to how they define what a disaster is. Okay, this is the bearable limit till which it could be a major incident. After that, a disaster is declared. So this team lead is going to declare a disaster. And then once he declares the disaster over there, then the set of sequences pass through, and then the next set of members who are all supposed to be there, and then they would do their specific work because the sub lead would be there, and then the coordinators would be there. Just like if you're a bit familiar with ITIL, change management, the change coordinator is there. So similar in that way, a coordinator, a lead, and then it's a complete cycle of team who work on this. And then they ensure that the disaster time is completely utilized in getting the recovery done, and they make the appropriate communication to all the stakeholders all the time. They open up a channel. Previous days, it used to be a chat. These days, WhatsApp is also there, which is official. WhatsApp is also being allowed in some organizations. So when a disaster gets declared, then they open a group chat, and then they pull in all the right members. And then if a change is supposed to be executed at that time, they get exceptional approvals and all, and then they try to bring back the data as soon as possible. So they completely take control of the situation. They are the team who will be working in case when a disaster occurs. And then they ensure that this particular disaster, which was a test, or if it's a real disaster, then documented everything, what happened, how it happened, and what are all the measures which were taken to control or arrest the situation, and it should be sent to all the stakeholders as a communication. And the final thing, which I would say personally again and again and again, is test as much as possible, because many a times tests have become fruitful, but at the time of disasters, just because of a backup failure, just because of a file was not available, just because the synchronization was not happening, just because of the connectivity issue was there, the test was okay, but in sometimes the disaster, they were not able to get to the RPO, and then the business had to bear the brunt. So we need to ensure that it keeps getting tested all the time. And every time it could not be a simulation test, because if it's going to be a full-fledged simulation, then it's going to require the participation from everybody. So it should be planned accordingly on a small scale at least. Restore testing should be done because data is the primary live thing which is running in all the wires. So that particular thing called data should be ensured that restore testing ensures that whatever surface it is present on, either it is on a disk or in the cloud or in the tape, the restoration to the point which it is requested should be made possible. If that is done, you're good. The next 3 slides, we are just going to go through a bit faster because it's going to be a bit self-explanatory, but it is just going to say about what are all the different kind of technologies over here. From the top to the bottom, a complete analysis of the environments, the administration, user and physical environments, and the IT elements, applications, middleware, operating system. What are all the typical kind of failures where we can experience a crash or a memory leak in the form of a middleware, or a connectivity loss, which is like a site itself is down, is what they call in terms of network when we used to work in network. So what would be the solution for that, and what could be the fault protection that could be applicable for this particular scenario? And if there's an operating system error, so if, say for example, if it's a crash or if it's a driver error, those were earlier days. So these days it's getting arrested through virtualization and cloud. But clustering is one thing which is always applicable, because in case if a box is down, if any blade server or if any single server is down in the connectivity terms, then clustering, and then the high availability, they call it as HA. So these are the solutions which are fault protection, which is applicable immediately. And these things must be analyzed, and that's where the risk assessment comes in. And these things should be tested, and we should ensure that this fallback could always be success. In case if a fallback is not possible, your disaster recovery methods fail. So that is what is the overall picture about all these technologies. If we go a bit deep, as I say, one layer into this, it will be into level 1 on the core segments, just on the physical premises, network, compute, and storage, because it starts from top to bottom. We talk about the premises itself. What if a blackout happens on your entire site? So you have alternate sites, which is hot, warm, and cold, like how Lavanya explained. Hot site is something which is readily available. Warm is something which is like you have some facilities over there, bare metal, bare minimum, and then you will have to assemble rest of that. Cool site is like site is available, and then basic information is available, and then you have to build from there. But these are strategic. So you can decide upon when you want a hot site, when you want a warm, and when you want a cold. Reciprocal condition is between two organizations. So I give you this site, I give you this particular cold site. So you can ensure that my data is made resilient, or it is made up and running in this particular amount of RPO. So I could even recollect somebody asking about an RTO and RPO. So I have an internal RPO and RTO, and I have an external RPO and RTO as well to the cloud vendor or to any other vendor. So how could that be taken? It should be connected. It should be connected in the sense your RPO and RTO should rule. It should rule the row. Say, for example, if mine is always 97%, I would also always demand it from the external as 99%, which is an availability perspective. So the external RPO and RTO, which you require as a contract, as an SLA with the third parties, should be in connectivity with your internal organization's RTO and RPO. So you would have calculated it. You would have done it based on the risk management, based on the risk assessment, based on the asset criticality. You would have derived that particular factor. So that RTO and RPO of value, which you keep it with your third parties, should be directly proportional to the internal value which you keep over here. So that is a very important point which needs to be kept in mind. Network infrastructure, anything can happen, right? Anything can happen. So if you lose a connectivity and undersea cable is cut, or you have a major outage over there, blackout over there. So what are all the kind of recovery options you have? You can have, most of the cases, if the device is out in network cases, they would always design the network in such a way that a redundant device is there. Always a redundant network is there, because when you talk in the network language, the first thing is, okay, how redundant is your network? What is the redundancy? And even if we talk in storage networks, we used to ask about, okay, what is the redundancy for this particular fabric? I believe somebody has to go on mute. Thank you. So yeah, so how redundant is your network, and how redundant is your network design, and how frequently are your rules data backed up? Can we back it up? Yes, there are options to back up the data taken in form of script from switches and routers, use a TFTP protocol. It's technically possible, and to ensure that all the design and the rules are backed up, and then you have the backup in a safe moment elsewhere. And DNS, even if you lose a DNS, there is an option of having the round robin DNS, so that if you lose one entity of DNS server, you can get it from the other server as well. So it's not in one single point. This is just to avoid something called as SPOF, which is called a single point of failure. And in compute has blasted off these days. It's awesome, because say something like physical servers used to be the only element quite some time before. Now these are all virtual servers, and it's a lot more easier to back up these servers itself, the entire operating system itself, as a VMDK file in VMware, or in the virtual toolbox from Oracle. You can back up the complete image itself as a snapshot, so that even if there are some file level changes inside there, snapshot wise, we can take it up. So we have a package. So we have a complete package for backing up the compute element itself. So, and you can have standby servers also, like how you have hot, warm, cold site, you can have standby servers. Storage and data, it is going to be a huge chunk. Let me talk about it in the next slide, because here, when I talk about storage and data, there's a lot to talk about, because when cloud came, storage and data has it has a huge lending hand over there. So the data is pretty safe over there, and then it is pretty much available 24/7. It could be backed up to the cloud, but there are a bit of limitations also. Bandwidth is first thing, and second thing, if you need a large chunk of data to be backed up, then cloud, if you should think about it, because the cost factor is a huge, because there are most number of organizations who still have not gone to the cloud for backup, though there are a lot of options which are available. Because the ideal practice is, if there is less than 10% of change in your data, then you need to think twice about if you want to really go to the cloud level backup, pertaining to the costs and the amount of connectivity which you have from your organization to the cloud, and the solutions which is going to back up from the ground to the cloud is also going to cost you a bit over there. But if you have it more, then the huge organizations definitely do it that way. Yep, and that is one strong way to be resilient as well. This contains a lot of factors. It contains something called as a SAN, which is a storage area network, which is a lot of disks connected to the server. And then that itself has these concept of RAID, which is redundant array of independent disks. So it's all completely redundant. And you have methods of RAID 0 to RAID 5, just plain single version of storing your data in multiple copies in multiple disks. That's all. But it has its own methods. It has a RAID 0, RAID 1. RAID 0 is not even a redundant way, but RAID 0 is also contained in that. So 1 is there, 2 is there, 5 is there, 5 and 0 is there. It all depends upon how your database administrator or how your application requires the data to be accessible. Say, for example, somebody would say, my database is pretty demand, it's in demand and it is very critical. The read, write, and the throughput should be much faster. It should not be slow. It should not be slow to access. And the time I write or commit to the database, the commit should happen in much faster manner. So then the storage administrator would apply the appropriate RAID factor to that. Say something like a 5 plus 0 or a 6, where the throughput on the read write is going to be more. And the way it writes parallelly into multiple disks also is going to be sequentially faster, much faster. But depends upon the disks also, because these days everybody understand about disks, because we are going to talk about iSCSI, or we are going to talk about solid state drives, which are SSD, which is going to be pretty costly. But SSD is going to be the de facto way if you want a real fast performance in a fetch and a throughput mode. So a bit technical, but that's how it is on disaster recovery on storage. And network attached storage is actually a filer option, which is a box itself by itself, which has an operating system by itself, which has its own protocol, which is an NDMP, and then which is again a safe method of getting the data backed up. And then that could in turn be connected to the SAN as well. We all would recollect an organization called NetApp, where they have this beautiful boxes of network attached storage being manufactured over there. And it has its own use cases, which is specifically applicable for the requirement of NAS over there. And then finally, you have this tape-based backups, which are like coming from the previous yesteryear decades, where you would run a full backup, you run a differential backup, you would run an incremental backup. Not technically not that tough. Full backup is something which is completely taking a one full backup of whatever the data is available. Differential is whatever was left out from the previous full backup, it is going to be differential. And incremental is whatever is from the previous backup itself, either it is full or differential, it is going to be an incremental. And snapshot is literally going to be another part of full backup, but it is applicable in cases like your VM backup or your specific database kind of backup, where you can apply the snapshot method and take a complete snapshot of the data and then throw it to another disk drive over there. A bit more on the technical front, but yes, this is much required, because this is just the basic introduction, but the introduction should at least contain this much of technical element as well. These are some code-based tools. I'm not going to go deep into that, but the ones which are there in the bold for AWS and Azure, these are suites for cloud, very specifically on the recovery suite, and rest of them are storage and backup options. And Google Cloud also has its own storage disk options, but there are other vendors who provide disaster recovery as a service itself. These tools are having a bit of automation in them, say something like ArcServe, UDP, or a SunGuard managed recovery solution, VM, AV suite. So they have the kind of scripting which is done in their suite, which talks to multiple applications. So how do they talk to multiple applications? Because they have the APIs written into them, and they don't deploy any agent, because previous years we used to deploy an agent over there in the box itself, and that is the only way that agent reports back to the primary manager, stating that, okay, hey, there is a change in the file and you need to back it up. No, that is not going to happen, because if that is there, it was creating an overhead, because it continuously used to keep scanning all the file system all the time. Now that is also not going to happen. So it's going to be light on the tool level itself, and then it is going to talk to the operating system and then check on the file levels, and then going to report back on the specific change in the file, so you can go ahead with your strategy as usual, full backup or an incremental or a differential backup. So these suites pretty much facilitate that, and for the applications and the storage level also, and on the backup strategy also, and pretty much safeguarding your RPO and RTO. But at the same time, decision has to be taken by the organization at which level these suites must be used. And there are many number of organizations who are still there in the traditional part itself, which is not in the cloud level, but they still have their own data center. They have their own servers running with the data, and they have their cloud level testing, which is happening as well. So that would be on the tools. Finally, let's quickly take a look into the career options and certifications. You have not many straightforward technical certifications for disaster recovery. I would say EDRP from EC Council is there. And rest of the certifications, apart from Mile 2, if you see, I would say 22301, CBCP, CBCI pretty much talk about business continuity much more, which is on the organizational perspective, and a bit less on the technical perspective, where you need to, if you want to know about replication, if you want to know about the replication methods, if you want to understand about RAID and the technical and the drive levels perspective, and if you want to understand how to do a disaster recovery for the MPLS outage on the network, if you have to manage, then these certifications would not be of much help on the technical perspective, but they would give you a fair amount of idea on the business level on top, based on which you can go to the specific vendors on the technical certification, where I've listed it down there. There's a plethora of vendors, and depending upon whichever solution and the tool which is being used in the organization, or which is the solution that you're going to deploy on the ground, you can take up the certifications accordingly. Say, for example, Cisco is got a plethora of certifications in network, and then EMC, they've got their own arrays of VMAX, VPlex, and VNX boxes, and and HP is there. IBM has their own family of storage as well as backup and recovery suite as well, which is a Tivoli management suite was there. Now it is called as Spectrum. So, and Veritas again. NetApp is there, which is again, we spoke about the network attached storage NAS box, and VM. Axo again. Axo was completely into backup and recovery once. Now they are into cloud-based solution as well, which is their latest solution is UDP. So anything which is specifically required for you on the technical front, you need to approach the technical vendor-based certification. But for that, the ones which are available over there are vendor-neutral certifications to give you a fair amount of idea on what it is all about. Perfect. And what are the kind of roles that which you can take? At the bottom level, you can start as a coordinator for disaster recovery and business continuity, and then you can move into a technology executive position, which is not the high level. This one which I'm talking about is the specialist level on the technical. Here, you have two divisions. You need to decide either you want to go into BCP or you want to specifically remain in technical. Because if you're going to remain in technical, then you can keep learning in the horizontal methods a lot, because there's going to be an awesome amount of technology which is over there, so which you can get some good knowledge about site reliability engineering. You can understand about DevOps, and then you can delve deep into storage or network administration. And then if you're a platform administration, which is going to include everything, it is going to benefit you like anything. But you need to put all these into the practice, and that has to benefit the business back again. So when you go to the managerial position, you must have had some hands-on in any of these technical methods to understand the technical resilience management. Without that, it'll be pretty tough over there. BCP is again an overarching concept, but again, like that talks into more on the management level aspects. For a disaster recovery, you should have had a bit of hands-on, certainly. And then you can definitely get into the senior resiliency roles, and the final role would be the chief resiliency officer itself, which is a straightforward role which is being created these days. So that personnel should have seen a lot of technical and a lot of business level contingencies, and he should have handled it, and he should have presented the appropriate RTO and RPO and advise the organization in the near future and in the coming months and years as to how they would be structured and how they should proceed in case of any kind of emergencies that which he has witnessed and which the organization has witnessed in the past, and take cue from the previous experiences. So that is where we come to the conclusion of this particular session of disaster recovery. Karthik, over to you back again.
Thanks, Sriram. So there are some questions. Would you want to go through and respond to those questions?
Sure.
Abbas has messaged them in the WhatsApp group.
Sure. me take it up right away. Okay.
Sriram, can I share my screen? I've made note of those questions.
Sure, you can. I'm also going through the WhatsApp. So first question, if in case a company is serving to customer as cloud platform and their RPO and RTO, should be a part of backup and restoration policy of the organization, or should be a part of the SLA with the customers. Like I said, there is a directly proportional element which is available from the organization to the contract which the organization is having towards its customers. So if you're having an SLA, derived out of the specific RTO, RPO for the organization, that should be the ruling roost. And whatever SLA are the sub SLAs which you're having with your third party, and that is what the element which you're going to mandate to your customers as well. I mean, to your third parties as well. And if you have a specific SLA from your customers, say for example, if you have the business running with your customers, whatever the SLA that they have, you should tie this RTO, RPO and SLA element to that. So it all runs into a cycle over there. I hope that answered it. I just need inputs regarding career progression as a business continuity analyst. Okay, I think we handled that, but if there is anything specific that you would like to know on the business continuity, we can certainly be of help. So you need to start taking up the business continuity as an element. And then you need to, I can suggest that ISO 22301 is the basic element of certification, where you would be getting to know about the nitty-gritty of business continuity, as well as how to apply it in the organization as well. There are 2-level certifications. Don't go for the lead auditor as yet if you have not started. I would suggest you take up the basic inputs and go for the lead implementer, because the implementer is a person who implements all the controls and the clauses in an organization. And then once you're seasoned with the concepts and the applicability of it, then you can go for a lead auditor perspective. Could you provide me with some risk IT framework with respect to BCPDR? Risk IT framework is, okay, one main risk IT framework which you can apply is COBIT itself. COBIT is there, ISO 27001 is there. Risk IT was one single element which was available with ISAC also quite some time before, but now it is converged into the COBIT control itself. So COBIT contains, COBIT 2019 to be very specific, contains a vast element of risk elements over there as a framework. 31,000 of ISO also talks about risk management full-fledged. 27,001 also has its own method. It depends upon which one would you take it up, but these are the main 3. And is it mandatory as per financial regularities to backup data on tape, although organization is replicating all data to near city data center or a standby data center, which can be easily restored by replicating to primary? There is a catch over here. Yeah, the element which you explained over here is absolutely true, because we have experienced it once. By default, considering the fact that the data could be restored much faster, we are backing up the data in form of disks. But per the regulations, if you are supposed to archive the data, because when you talk about long-term backup, we don't call it as backup. Anything which is more than 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, we call it as archive. So if, say, something like FDA, the Food and Drug Authority, if they mandate you to hold on to the data for 10 to 15 years, then you need to archive it, and tape is a better solution and a cheaper solution as well. Storing the data in the disk for that long time is not a feasible solution unless the organization does not mind the money. Tape is something which is pretty easy solution over there. And one good thing is they need to keep doing the restore testing back again so that they should not lose the data. In terms of backup, it is restore. When it comes to archive, it is called as retrieval. So they need to do a periodic retrieval, and that is also specified as a part of the regulation itself. So yes, if they mandate through a tape on the archival for a long term, we have to go by it. I hope that answers it. Is there any free tool for DRT? Okay. Depends upon which segment you want, but I would say as such, we don't have any free tool to contain DRT, disaster recovery technology, if you're talking about, because there are multiple elements which are mixed over here. I would not say collectively, but yeah, by parts you can check if it is there, but I don't know if it could be applicable to any organization, because we are touching about the live wire data over here. So, and there is no free means over here. Automated means, yes. Free means of tools, I don't think so. As a process, RTO should be equal to MAO. MAO should always be a higher limit. If MAO is 10 hours, your RTO should be 8 hours. maximum acceptable outage is the highest level of value. Your RTO should always be lesser than that, and it should be in proportion to MAO. They can never be equal. If it is equal, it is with a higher contingency, is what I would say. It can never be equal. So put it in such a way that RTO could always be the 75th or 80th percentile of your MAO. That could be an easy factor for you. Okay. Do we need to maintain a command center room for discussing or testing? Not required. Certainly not required. These days it's all virtual, so it's absolutely fine, because we have, in the past experiences also, we have always confined in virtual, and we have taken the virtual as a virtual room itself, and then we have executed the complete methodology over there. You don't need a dedicated command center over there. But a resilience operations always clubs hands with the physical administration and with the administration, facilities administration of the organization. Unlike a SOC or a NOC, you would not be required to have any specific command center over here. Again, let me reiterate, when it comes to DR, it is not that case. If it comes to BCP, a part is there where it actually exchanges hands with the local command center for facilities administration and the other examples like transport or whatever it is, because that is also one part of business continuity. So there they shake hands, but it is not a mandatory factor that you need to have a command control room, command center room for that. Okay. In case of cloud, how do we do assessment? Do we have any process documentation? That's a brilliant question. Yes. So what assessment are we talking about? Are we going to talk about disaster recovery assessment, or are you going to talk about the security in the disaster recovery? Yes, we have process documents for that, which is available. We can download it from the vendor itself if you go through a vendor-based process. But if it is framework-based process, say for example, 27001 mandates you something, or COBIT asks you to do something, 31,000 wise, you're supposed to check something, 22301 wise, you're supposed to maintain something, then going by these frameworks, you can still maintain your traditional way of ensuring that the data is backed up and it is kept and it is restored, or it is archived and retrieved in a periodic fashion, and everything is done through secure means and methods. So if you need to be a bit more specific on the assessment level, but yeah, that would answer the question. But we do have a lot of process documents that is pertaining specific for each and every method or framework which I spoke about earlier. I think I have answered all the questions over there. Karthik, I think we have come one full circle.
Yeah, I think you have answered all the questions. Thanks a lot, Sriram and Lavanya, for a very engaging session. And the link to the assessment is made available in the chat window. So the assessment will be kept open for another 45 to 50 minutes. So all the participants can take the assessment for the certificate of achievement. With that, Sriram and Lavanya, you can drop off the webinar. We'll keep the webinar bridge open just in case anybody wants to access the assessment link again. So we'll keep the window open for some time, but we can all drop off.
It was a wonderful opportunity, Karthik. Thank you so much for that. And it was a pleasure talking about disaster recovery and business continuity methods today. So thank you, Karthik. Thanks you audience.
Thanks a lot, Sriram. I think I was just thinking, while you were speaking, maybe it would be a good idea to do a webinar